Welcome back, everybody, to our series on world building. John and I are going to be talking about economics today. And to be honest, not all of us have an economics degree, so this can be a little intimidating when you're trying to dive in and creating a world of currency and trade within your culture. So I'm going to turn it over to John to talk a little bit about how you can make economics somewhat simple if you're starting to just dive into this for the first time.
I feel like we should start with maybe a caveat that neither of us have an economics degree.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Yeah, so that not a strong point. Just try to use some common sense maybe and some of the research that we can do in order to try and be informative. But no, I'm sure there are economists who play D&D who have robust economies.
Are you looking for a new grim, dark steampunk setting to introduce to your players? Well, Dungeon Brew has created a campaign setting manual called Thegum, and it is now available for your support on BackerKit. It has new rules for magic disruption in regions. There are rules to create your own corrupted gods to introduce to your players. There are new rules for mechanics in regards to the firearms for the new steampunk weapons that are being introduced, and there is new magic, new species, new subclasses, new factions, and so much more that's being included in this manual. You can go download a PDF sample on the BackerKit and see what all we have put into it, but right now we need your dice at our table, so head on over. We'll see you there.
All right, so the question of how to keep it simple, the obvious answer is just use what you're going to find in a normal D&D manual. The system for 5th edition, for example, is fairly straightforward in terms of where everything fits. If you look in the chapter that discusses equipment and costs and economy, it gives you information for what the cost for a daily life is for a servant and for somebody who is a little bit more well off, and then if you have a wealthy lifestyle, that type of thing. I think there's 3 or 4 different breakdowns, and the idea is that you can basically just go in there and say, hey, PCs, whenever you're in town, whenever you're traveling, whenever you're doing this type of stuff, daily lifestyle, it costs X amount. You need to be deducting that each day, and that should cover things like food, lodging, etc. Like it's very straightforward, very simple for that type of thing. If we're wanting to go simple in the sense of trying to bring it a little bit closer to realism, the easiest, the most straightforward way of doing that, especially if you're talking about something that's closer to like the real world, medieval or real world in terms of the actual amount of money that people would have had, you would transfer all mundane items into silver pieces. And personally, what I would do is I would keep all of your potions, magic items, and things like that still valued at gold pieces. And what that ends up looking like is when you have your adventurers going out and doing adventuring in the world itself, they should be getting treasures that are primarily copper and silver, electrum, for those people who use electrum pieces. I know that in my groups, a lot of times they're like, why am I getting EP? I don't know what these are for. But those would be more common currencies for lower classes, and those would be more common currencies for most exchanges versus gold pieces. Gold pieces should be far rarer. And when it comes to purchasing magic items and that type of thing, it makes a lot more sense that those are more difficult in order to, like, in terms of value. They should be further beyond in terms of reach, and not something that's easily accessible if you're allowing those things to be bought in the first place, I suppose.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when I think about most DMs that we've either encountered or spoken to in our time, many of them don't go very deep into the economy building piece of their world building.
Right.
They recognize that characters in game probably spend most of their time either dealing with the currency, what they're using, whether it's gold, silver, and what the exchange looks like for that currency, or their characters are spending time shopping.
Right.
Sometimes you'll see a campaign that's built up around trade or, the lack of resources or some sort of piece there. But for the most part, characters are primarily just looking at the gold and silver they're carrying and making sure they can actually carry it.
Right, and that's assuming that you even have somebody who's interested in, having a carry weight for gold. Which I think, as far back as I remember, we have always dealt with it in one way or another, just using a default of 50 coins as £1 or something like that. And so then you had to be careful and put money into bags of holding and other random things. And one of the things, too, that you brought up, just the notion of shopping, that's a very 3rd edition onward type notion of being able to even purchase magic items or purchase that type of expensive gear. Realistically, those types of things should be exceptionally rare to purchase, probably in the hands of nobles and, the aristocracy of whatever region that you're in. Maybe a very particularly wealthy merchant who has made his trade doing that type of thing might have magic items for sale, but it really starts to bend reality with the idea that you walk into this poor town of 500 people and this random trader has a bunch of magic items on the wall for sale in the town, because value-wise it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I think that we should try and bring this back into world building. We're talking about economy kind of in a general sense, but in terms of world building, these are the things that you kind of want to consider, because we're looking at things like what level of magic you have in the world, what does the population look like, what does technology look like. All of those things kind of start fitting in together. You have to start making decisions about what does the average shopkeeper's shop look like in terms of availability, what does the coinage look like in terms of what is accessible by a class of citizen, versus your serfs versus your peasants versus your burghers versus your knights and nobles and kings and queens. What kind of money do they have? And that determines what they can afford. That determines what's realistic. It was very common almost in any edition of D&D. I think 5th edition has actually curbed this down a little bit, but especially in older editions when there was the idea of you have to earn coins in order to be able to gain experience points, right? You get to level 10 or 15 or something like that in Beckme or 2nd edition, you have a metric ton of gold, and we're talking gold, like so much gold that it doesn't actually exist in the world, because there is a finite amount of gold in the world, but somehow they have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of gold pieces. And it's like, at what point does that stop making any sense whatsoever? And it's difficult to anticipate that from level 1, but something that you should be paying attention to when you're considering world building. What is the economic limit of the world or of a region that you're choosing to place adventures in?
So I'm curious, John, if you can share a little bit how much time you spend looking at like the commerce and how possible that is in regions that you build, or is it something that comes up during the course of even gameplay when you actually start building out those pieces?
So even though you and I first started playing with Beckme 20 years ago, 25 years ago, somewhere in there, even though we started there, we really cut our chops on like 3rd edition, right? And 3rd edition, to my recollection, had a habit of giving you town statistics anytime that you would go into a town. It would say the population is this, 74% are human, 15% are elf, 3% are orc, etc., etc. The other information that it would give you is it would give you, this is how much wealth the town has. And then it would also say, it would basically say, listen, the town is 3,000 people. It has 10,000 gold pieces worth of wealth. I'm throwing this out here, just a random number. It has 10,000 gold pieces worth of wealth. This is like the actual value of the town. And then it would say gold on hand, and this would be something like the mayor has access to, or whoever, is like 1,000. So it's this very small amount. When I do towns, I don't always go in and do that, but that's something that sticks very clearly in my mind. The idea that a town itself has intrinsic value, and there is a certain amount of wealth that is accessible by the higher-ups in the town. Like gold on hand. This is what they could pull at a moment's notice if they absolutely have to. And so the idea of PCs coming through a town and doing an adventure, maybe the mayor of that town has 1,000 gold pieces. He is not looking to blow his entire savings account on adventurers blowing through town to help fix an issue, unless it's exceptionally dire. Really what it should be is something along the lines of him going, listen, I've got 1,000 gold. I'm going to give you guys each 50 gold. There's 4 of you. That's 200 gold. And then there might be some negotiation. And if they're particularly good at negotiators or particularly evil and willing to like put the town on hard times, they might bump that up to 500 or 600 gold. But realistically, that mayor is not going to, like I said, get rid of all of the money that he has available to him.
That information alone, I think, is just so central to the idea of building commerce, though, to think about that when you're building up cities in that retrospect. Because I know that I get a little, careless and rewarding adventurers with money.
I do too.
Do things. Yeah, that can completely, that would destroy the economy of a city if I were to actually allow that to happen.
I get excited about giving stuff to players. Like that's my biggest issue is that, especially at low levels, it's like, oh, we've been playing for like 3 or 4 sessions. Man, I really want to make a magic item, and I make something really cool, and then I give it to you guys, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that player's too powerful, and then I have to give every other character a magic item, and then before I know it, I'm going, geez, they're way too powerful as a group, and the stuff itself is worth too much money. And it's like, so I give you guys something and you don't want it because for whatever reason, and you go, oh, I want to sell that, and I go, oh my gosh, they have so much money now. It really can get out of control quickly. So I'm right there with you, man.
But yeah, bringing this back to world building, and we've kept this Greek theme throughout these videos that we've been doing and talking about Greece especially.
At least trying.
But Greece, at least trying to. But ancient Greece was really interesting in how their trade and commerce was put together, because they were really big into colonization. So one of the things that they would do frequently is that they would build up trade between like the founding city and the colony, and continue these constant trade pieces that would go back and forth in order to help them build wealth in some way. And they also had other interesting pieces that were built in as well, like taxation was a thing in Greece that occurred. You could be taxed for your home and for your slaves and for your goods that you were acquiring. And they were one of the, I don't want to say they were the first ones, but they had started with currency too, where they were creating minting coins and putting them together, and having that essentially being utilized, and people had to come in and exchange their coins for the currency within that city in order to buy things. And this is why you now find those coins spread all the way across the world, because you had to come in and exchange your coins to use their specific currency to buy things and trade things within the city, and then you'd be left over with, you know, whatever the leftovers were, and bringing them back to your own town where they were essentially useless. But those are all interesting pieces of Greece culture that you could enter in that would be fascinating for characters to come into a city, have gold, and they have to trade it in for a specific coin in order to trade within that city in order for it to be valuable.
Yeah, so along those same lines, this is getting into medieval territory, but it is something useful to keep in mind. And this is something that came across when I was doing research for the work that I've been working on. The idea of what it costs to transport goods and services. In medieval times, and I'm doing that broadly, we're talking 1000 to 1500 AD. The cost to transport a ton, which is roughly 2,100 pounds, or there's a cubic foot measurement in there. The cost to transport a ton of goods over land was 3 times as much to do it over sea. And we're talking about per mile. And the reason for that was because of the difficulty of terrain. And this works particularly well for Greece because the terrain of Greece is very rugged. So the idea of basically saying, listen, I've got something that I want to ship, basically, and we'll use that loosely, ship from Athens to Sparta. The cost over land is more expensive because it's so much more difficult to move goods over land than it is to move things over sea. And for Greece, this would be particularly true because, like I said, the terrain versus what's going on the oceans. And that's something to keep in mind in terms of economy. A landlocked village or city has a far more difficult time of obtaining, of trading, of, transporting goods than something that is accessible by a river or an ocean or a sea, because those places actually have the ability to quickly move goods from one location to another location and benefit from that. They move it far more quickly, they move it far more cheaply, and that should affect other factors that go into what is going on in terms of your world building for any land or any city or any country that you're talking about building in that world.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that plays into well with Greece culture too, in just terms of what like their shopping centers were. They were called agoras, where you would essentially come together and merchants could come and try to sell their stuff within there. But you and I do this a little bit already from time to time, John, where we have like little tables that we function off of the rarity of an item and whether or not it's going to be within that particular city and if they can buy it. And knowing that things can be shipped a little bit better and traded a little bit easier potentially in this culture that you're building means that there might be a higher percentage or chance that you're going to find the item that you're looking for in that area. But another thing about ancient Greece is that the prices weren't always fixed, and you and I kind of play with that as well.
Right.
We roll percentages to see if what the price is for that specific item within the city, and then you can use like charisma modifiers and things as well to try to adjust the price or change it or bargain to get a different deal on it.
Right.
But all of that makes that effective or something that you can utilize within gameplay too, within the specific world that you're building.
Right, and all of those things really depend on to what degree of specificity you want to get into. Because, like I said, I want to bring this back just a little bit, just in terms of if you want to keep things simple, you already have an economy system built into most D&D games. Those things are put there. You just have to decide how important it is for you, to what degree you want the realism in there, and sometimes, like we've talked about before, you don't have to do every single little thing in order to try and make the world feel real. Putting in a couple of things here or there help to give you the verisimilitude that you're looking for. You go into a village and the players are looking for something specific. We had this case in the Beckme campaign I was looking for. One of the players really wanted to buy a horse. And what I said is, listen, there are no horses in this town, because he wanted a war horse. I was like, this town is too small. They don't really have war horses. That's not something to support. If you want a war horse, you need to go to this big town that's 3 days away, because you can't find them here. And you don't have to I didn't have to do a whole lot of anything else other than just basically say, listen, this is a valuable good. It's not available in this location. Those are available in the big cities. The same thing happened when you guys were trying to purchase, I think you wanted to buy some magic items, which I was allowing on the table at that point, and said, you have to go to the biggest city. Like, they aren't available in small towns and stuff like that anywhere out in this region. The only place you can go, you have to go to Specularum if you want to be able to buy a magic item of some kind. That's where those things are located for purchase. You can't find them out here. Those are things that you can do to make the economy feel real without doing a lot.
I was going to say, I agree with that. I remember when I sent you guys through the Hell campaign, they only accepted demon coins in Hell. And so you guys had to exchange your gold into demon coins in order to purchase anything down there. And I didn't really build out a big old full-fledged economy system. I just had a really simple exchange rate. And it felt very real walking through it, because it completely changed the dynamic of how economics work.
And that was assuming they even accepted realistic coins to begin with, because if I recall, in some cases that are just like, if you don't have demon coins, then what am I supposed to do with gold? Kind of a thing. It's like some of them would take it because they presumably had business that occurred, across the planes of existence.
Realms,
But for other ones, they're like, this is useless to me. It's like, I don't have any use for your gold and your silver. What am I supposed to do with that?
You got to go out and grind and find your own demon coins if you want to buy something.
Right, exactly. So I feel like there's a lot that we covered and talked about in here. I think that we could probably do an entire other video where we got into even more depth in economy, which I didn't initially think when we first got into this, but it is a very robust aspect of gameplay that is central to the way that the characters experience the world, because the primary thing that they deal with is treasure. It is going into dungeons or doing quests or whatever. They get treasure. They want to spend their treasure. There are so many things that come into the aspects of treasure and economy that can be built out in a world and in a D&D campaign that realistically there's a lot to be said about it. But I think in terms of world building, I think we've kind of covered the bases, at least to get started on how you consider where your economy should fit within the world as a whole, and in terms of individual towns and cities.
Dungeon Brew.